And there's been all kinds of things going on the last couple weeks in this country. I don't know if you've been following anything.
But really quick, you're right. I'm like a lot better in the afternoon
Yeah, you are.
than nights or mornings. It's like
Yeah.
I'm still like
Yeah, right.
dealing with my
I know.
sinuses.
Yeah, I noticed that, man. When you first get going in the morning, I can tell like you kind of like drag yourself here,
Yeah.
and your first half hour is just
I'm still asleep.
little touch and go,
Yeah.
and you're definitely better in the afternoon.
And then the night with Nisha, I was sleepy.
Oh, you did fine. Like
Yeah.
you did, yeah,
No, I was sleepy.
yeah.
So I think afternoons. I mean, I would still do mornings and nights if we have to, but you're
Yeah.
right. I feel a lot more engaged now. Today.
You're a lot more talkative.
Yeah.
I can't interrupt you as much. It's good.
Yeah, I can't let you interrupt me, man. I can't. I think I'm gonna have to start implementing that, not letting Adam interrupt me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get my feelings hurt. You just have to like, just do it.
Yeah, just do it. But yeah, man. So we haven't. So that was in January. It's great to be back. It's
Yeah.
great to be doing this. I love, like you said, the cadence we got going on. Please comment, like, and subscribe.
Yes.
Drop the pretense. I told you I had some like logo ideas and some banner ideas, some artwork, but what we have so far works. Like we don't need to get too complex because I
Right.
feel like the conversations themselves are the meat and potatoes.
Right.
You know, everything else is aesthetic and it's branding and it's nice, but it'll come. But what's new that's been happening in the country?
Oh, well, just Trump's been.
Oh yeah, oh that
I mean, Trump's been. He hit the ground running,
yeah,
and it's pretty crazy watching this whirlwind
yeah.
go on. We'll see how this shakes out.
I think ICE is looking for me around here.
Better watch out. You better have your green card,
I don't
buddy.
think those were colors.
Yeah, they. Well, did you see? Ron DeSantis has taken the legislature in Florida to task for making a weak bill. So they, the Florida legislature made a bill that allegedly was to support the Trump dictate or the mandate to get the illegals out of the country, but they did like a switcheroo where the bill was actually working against Trump's mandate to help ICE with deportations.
Why? How?
And I mean, you know, like I don't know if you're familiar with like Florida's government and how they're set up, but our representatives in our Senate are very, very majority Republican. So, you know, we're almost the opposite of California. California's all Democratic, like they have a super majority. So
Yeah.
the Republicans, the poor Republicans in California don't really have anything to say because they have no power. It's the opposite here. So the Democrats don't really have anything to say. But the only issue is that we still have our share of, you know, the term rhinos, like Republican in name only, RINO. So Republicans always talk about the rhinos because there's a lot of Republicans that will say all the right things but then do the opposite. And
What does that look like?
well,
what do they mean by that?
well, okay, so I'll give you a really classic rhino move. This is an old one. So George H.W. Bush, I don't know if you remember him, but you know he was the president right after Reagan. So he was Ronald Reagan's vice president, and one of his promises on the trail was there will be no new taxes, new taxes. And in his 4-year term, this is probably one of the reasons why he only had a 4-year term. He raised taxes. So that's a rhino move. We have people. What's her name? Susan Collins, I think, from Alaska. Am I saying that right? She's like stereotypical rhino. So she talks kind of like a Republican, but she often votes with the Democrats.
Okay.
So to me, it's like just go join the Democrats. Don't pretend you're a Republican.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney, he's a really good example of a rhino. And he ran for president, and he, you know, like he was just a light Democrat as far as it goes. So, and we've effectively gotten rid of a lot of them.
Okay.
But this policy in Florida was very weak to assist Trump on his efforts to deal with the illegal immigration, and DeSantis is just tearing them apart and basically telling them like go back to the drawing board. And they passed the bill, but they haven't sent it to him.
But I don't understand why. I don't get it. What's the conflicting?
Well,
Because DeSantis is Republican, right?
yeah, and DeSantis wants it to be a stronger bill where basically
Because there was a thing that happened here last year about the immigrants, that it was just Florida, right?
Well, yeah, so like Florida's done a pretty good job, even in spite of Biden's weak policies. They've done a pretty good job dealing with illegal immigration in Florida. And this bill comes along, and it actually, like one of the main things it does is it forces all local agencies to get permission through the commissioner of agriculture or something, which doesn't make any sense. It does kind of make sense, but on its face it doesn't make sense. So basically, instead of making a law that just says, hey, local law enforcement, if you pick up someone, if someone gets a DUI and you've discovered that they're illegally in this country, you can just literally just send them right to ICE and just have them know. Instead, they're like, no, you have to get permission, and it like turns into like catch and release, Florida style. And Ron DeSantis is like saying like, we already had this before this bill. We had stronger things in place before this bill. This bill would actually weaken us, but.
So, okay.
I'll tell you what.
I don't think I'm following.
I'll tell you why they're doing it.
Okay. What was the thing that DeSantis had in place? What was his style? What was his approach?
Well, he was still trying to do everything he could to empower ICE to be able to deal with.
But his was the one that if law enforcement caught you, you could just go straight to ICE.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then the new bill is saying.
No, you have to ask permission.
Okay. All right.
And like. It turns into a bit of a mess. And I can tell you, at least I can suspect why they did it. It's because there probably are some special interests in Florida, like farmers, who, and this hence agriculture. There are people who are farmers and doing things that are exploiting this sub minimum wage workforce that's illegal.
That's illegal, and it's obviously immigrants. Who
Yeah,
take those jobs.
so like these Republicans in name only were kowtowing to their special interests, and basically like, we're going to make this strong sounding bill to help, but really it hurts because we don't want to make it easier to get rid of all these illegal aliens that are here picking our crops.
It's like finding loopholes.
You're right.
Gotcha.
So basically, he's calling them out, calling them a bunch of hypocrites and liars.
By he, you mean DeSantis?
Yeah, DeSantis.
Okay.
And what's interesting is they haven't sent they passed the bill, but they haven't sent it to him because he'll veto it. He'll knock it down, which will make it go back, and they'll have to get a supermajority.
So DeSantis is not in agreement with what Trump's doing?
DeSantis is not in agreement with what Florida's legislature is doing.
Okay.
And Florida's legislature and Senate are trying to ramrod through a bill that would have weakened DeSantis' ability to cooperate with Trump. So now...
So the Florida Senate is the one that's rhinos. Okay.
Well, some of them.
Yeah.
And I think some of them are... I suspect some of them were hoodwinked. Like, now that they know what was going on in the bill, they'd probably be like, yeah, maybe I wouldn't have voted for that if I knew what was really going on. Okay. Because they didn't get a lot of time to review the bill. So they kind of
Which bill?
The bill in Florida that Ron DeSantis is objecting to.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know the specifics. Like I'm not like real educated.
I don't know if I got this right, but I thought that DeSantis did something last year which put a real scare in a lot of immigrants in Florida, where like if you're in the same car with an illegal immigrant, you can get locked up.
I don't know about
the
that.
workforce, they had to start verifying citizenship if you had more than 20 employees, I think it was. It was like this really big thing that happened in Florida last year.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I believe you. I don't know the specifics.
And then apparently that was taken off. So that lasted for a few months. It was a big scare. A lot of immigrants left Florida, or people were not trying to move into Florida if they were illegal immigrants.
Right.
And then I don't know what happened, but apparently that was removed. And that law, whatever the name of that law was,
It was changed. Like
it was changed and
okay.
removed, abolished, or whatever.
Okay. I'm not familiar with it.
Was that maybe a test for what Trump wanted? Because this was
I don't
before
know.
Trump.
Yeah, this is before Trump. This is happening live now.
Okay.
Yeah, this is happening at this moment, and yeah, and I mean there's definitely a lot of moving parts right now. I'm gonna be curious to see. We've been keeping our ear to the ground, watching the news, trying to understand how to take all this stuff.
I'll tell you something. I'll give you a bit of my opinion on this. When I lived in New York, friends and family that were out of New York would tell me, man, I heard New York is so bad. I heard this, and that. And they would hear about news that I didn't know about, right? And I'd say, I mean, it's bad, but it's not that bad. It can't be as bad as...
They're hearing how bad it was in Florida or how bad it was in
New York.
Okay.
New York. I'd say I'm in those shoes now. I don't live in New York anymore, and I try to keep up with a lot of New York stuff. And from my understanding, not being in New York has gone downhill with crime. It's gotten worse, and apparently those Venezuelan refugees have, and I got Venezuelan friends and people, but the consensus is that these refugees are like criminal-minded, and they've run rampant in New York, robbing, stealing, doing a whole bunch of stuff, right? That they shouldn't be doing. Again, this is me living in Florida. I'm not really there on the ground. I don't really understand, but this is the news I'm getting, right? And I've spoken to a few friends, and they're like, yeah, it's true. Like, these Venezuelans are all over, and there's a lot of crime. But it's probably not just Venezuelans. It's probably Colombians, Mexicans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, and then they get thrown in the pot with Venezuelans, right? But I guess they are catching
and white meth addicts or something.
Maybe whatever, blacks, whatever.
It doesn't matter.
But
it's just crime.
It's crime, but they're catching a lot of Venezuelans because there's what you see on the news, and then the news that you get in the hood.
Right.
The stuff you get in the trenches, and then so you get the primary source from like my boys and my friends and all of that. So, from my understanding, that was a big deal. Now, apparently, with this new Trump thing, the streets in New York are quiet,
Oh yeah.
So I saw these videos. There's a street in Queens called Roosevelt Avenue. Back in the day when I was a kid, it was cool. I liked it. As I got older, it became really like, it's a lot of street commerce, and it's not like permitted commerce. It's like vendors and people selling outside, but it's also a hub for like illegal like papers, like not illegal, like what's like fabricated, like counterfeit, like paperwork, like immigration work, counterfeit, like social security numbers, like crime, prostitution, drug dealing. They started opening up a lot of homosexual clubs and also regular clubs where there was like prostitute. Like it got really bad.
Okay.
Right now, there's good with the bad. The bad gets thrown in with good, and I don't necessarily see like vendors, like street vendors who sell like cultural food outside or shirts and merchandise to make a living as bad. But the truth is that a lot of these vendors are illegal immigrants.
I got
right?
you, yeah.
So it was just known. If you wanted to go get something from Colombia, from Mexico, something that was like authentic, traditional, Queens is just a hub of all cultures mixed. Queens is the most culturally diverse borough in New York, right? You got everything in Queens, everything. Right? The whole world lives in Queens, right? So on this street in Roosevelt, I would see videos of people doing walkthroughs with their phone and just seeing like people soliciting sex, soliciting illegal documents, soliciting things, and then you also see food. It's just really like a marketplace.
It's a melting pot of
marketplace, and it's a lot of, I guess, illegal immigrants, right? I would see that before the Trump, the new Trump stuff, right? The new Trump administration, right? Now there's videos of people walking through Roosevelt Avenue, and it's
quiet.
Quiet, no one out there.
That's
right?
crazy.
They did that, and I saw a video like that in where I'm from in New York, Washington Heights. There's a street where they apparently it's not to the scale of Roosevelt Avenue in Queens, but there are little pockets, and really in Saint Nick, and there's a lot of streets that are. It's just a Latino neighborhood. Yeah, growing up there, I couldn't say, oh, he's illegal, she's legal.
Right.
It's just Hispanic.
You wouldn't know.
And I'm first generation Colombian American, and there was a bunch of like first, second, third generation Dominican American, Puerto Rican American. It's just hard to say. A lot of people spoke English and Spanish, and you just grow up seeing it, and it's normal. And now being here where you don't really see that, I can see how if you compare those streets in Washington Heights to Roosevelt Avenue in Queens, it's almost similar, but to not to that scale. So they did a walk through certain streets that I know in my neighborhood, and they're also quiet. It's not there. Now, I say the Washington Heights one because apparently these Venezuelan refugees have been this is a thing. I don't know. It could be it could be false news also, but a lot of people are saying that these Venezuelans, it's not only here in the U.S., but also in other countries, like Latin American countries, when they try to escape, like Maduro's.
The dictatorship.
The dictatorship. They went into Colombia, into Ecuador, and apparently I don't know how true this is, but the Venezuelans are causing a lot of crime in everywhere they're going, right? Forgive me, Venezuelans. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I'm hearing, right? Because I'm not experiencing that, so I don't know. I can't say yes or no.
Right.
But my boys in New York tell me,
And I work with a bunch of Venezuelans, and they're great.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
Okay.
I'm talking about the criminal Venezuelans.
The criminal Venezuelans.
Not Venezuelans.
Yeah.
Right.
The criminal Venezuelans. I'm specifically saying the refugee Venezuelans.
Right, and I think the Venezuelans that I work with would probably acknowledge that there have been a rash of criminal Venezuelans that have been let into this country.
Yeah, but I think that there are refugees who are probably not criminals, right? But they're in those communities with the criminal Venezuelans.
I mean,
that they're all catching
their
a bad
only
rap.
Their only criminality is that they're here legally.
Well, I think they're legally here
Oh,
because they're
legal.
refugees.
Okay,
I
got
believe
you.
they're refugees, so I think they were sanctioned. It was permitted, but then they taken advantage of the system, the American system. They were flooding like certain streets in New York. I saw videos of they were like just outside of like 8th Avenue, just all outside flooding the streets and on little bikes, on those motorbikes, and I guess they were stereotyped to be like gangs and crimes, and I think there is some truth to it. I think there probably is some truth to it, right? So where I'm from in Washington Heights, some of my boys told me, yeah, that's happening here too, where the neighborhood I grew up in is predominantly Dominican. I guess there's a growth in the Venezuelan population, right?
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, and when my boys told me that some of them, they are committing the crimes. They are, it is getting worse. If these videos are true of what I'm seeing, right, where these streets are getting quiet, they're not committing these crimes, or at least not overtly out in the open, I think it's a good thing. Because I'm not a fan of senseless crime.
Oh, yeah, right. Who would be? Who would be?
With that being said, there are crimes. I'm not justifying them, and I know I'm a Christian man, and I want to do right, and I want to be a good citizen. But there are certain crimes that, like, I do understand why they're done because of the upbringing that I shared with these people. That I know, okay, I understand why it's done. Now, it's not all justified, but if it's senseless crimes, if it's robbing old ladies, murdering people for no reason, right?
You can't justify that.
You can't justify that. So it's a good thing. Now, the flip side is, I guess there are. It's scary to think that a family gets split up because the child was born here, but the parent is not.
Well, so that's the whole. And you heard that one executive order that's getting challenged, where he's ending birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
So.
And how far back does that go? Because technically, then we're all immigrants.
So I'm no expert on this. Consult your legal expert.
Right. No, and neither am I. And I'm just. I'm speaking from a point of like not really having a hard stance on either.
Yeah.
And also, I'm speaking from a point of saying I can see the goods and bads on both sides.
Well, so my limited understanding is that the birthright citizenship is part of the 14th Amendment, and I think what it's doing, what the original intent was to make it so that the freed slaves from the Civil War had a way to get assimilated. So basically, like, they wanted to state it explicitly because they didn't want people to think like, oh, okay, we can't use slavery anymore. Well, like, send them back to Africa, right? Like, get rid of them. It was basically drawing a line in the sand and saying that if you as a freed slave only know the United States is your home, which that was the case with the slaves, then you were a naturalized citizen. So basically, like, you obtained your quote unquote birthright citizenship. What that has morphed into is the notion that if somebody comes across to the United States from a foreign country and has a child on U.S. soil, that child, by right, is now a U.S. citizen.
So they're trying to take advantage of it.
Right. So, and there's a strong argument against that assumption, because if somebody is like a foreign national, like they're an ambassador, and they're living in the U.S. as an ambassador, and they have a child here, that child isn't a U.S. That child is not a U.S. citizen. Like, that child is no different than a foreigner. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, so we already have things in place that make it clear that birthright citizenship isn't an all-encompassing thing.
And before you continue, I also learned something else the other day, because I'm having this discussion at my job, and I thought that birthright citizenship was like a human rights thing, like that was all over the world.
it's not.
Like, if you're born in China, you're Chinese. If you're born,
Nope.
I thought that was my understanding. Like, you're from where you're born, right?
Yeah, nope.
And somebody educated me and corrected me and said, well, I said I didn't know. I was ignorant.
Yeah.
I was openly saying I'm ignorant. I thought that's right. And she told me, she goes, in Israel is not.
Yeah, most countries aren't
think-
like that.
I think she said
Some-
parts of
Yeah,
like in India or something.
Some countries are like that, but most countries aren't like that. Like, they don't accept that, which, I mean, kind of makes sense. Like, all right, so you're telling me if you're here legally as a foreign citizen from a different country, and you have a child here, that child is not considered a citizen because you're here as a guest on a visa. So, like, at that point, legally speaking, like, everybody knows that child is a child of whatever country you came from. But now you're telling me that if someone comes here illegally, now that child gets special privileges over someone who's been here legally, that their child doesn't get special privileges?
What special privileges?
So what I mean is, like, if you come here legally on a visa and you have a child, your child is not a citizen of the United States just because they were born here. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Your
Oh,
child.
that's a thing.
That
Like,
is
if
a-
you come with a visa
yeah.
and you have a child, that child is not a.
Yeah, that child's your kid. You're a subject of you're part of the country that you came from. Your kid is too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I met some lady
Like, you have to apply
who
for.
came from Brazil, and she told me she was here on a visa,
Yeah.
and she said, no, I'm going back to Brazil, but I just came because I'm pregnant, so my child could be born here. She was here on a visa. She told me, I'm on a visa, but I'm going back.
I'm open to correction on it.
I don't know.
I'd like to
I
look
don't-
into. I'm open to correction on it, but this is the debate.
Unless she was referring to she preferred the medical treatment here.
Maybe, but it might even be something that is interpreted differently from state to state. But, like, I think what Trump's doing is he wants this to go to the Supreme Court. Like, he wants this to get pushed up to the Supreme Court so that we can once and for all have an interpretation of that amendment that basically states whether or not an anchor baby, like, that's what they're called, right? They're called anchor babies for a reason,
But I have a question for you, Adam. I mean, you're a child of immigrants, right?
right?
Were they illegal?
No, they were legal.
They were legal?
They were asylum seekers.
Oh, okay, so it's different. Okay, so if he's removed...
By the time I was born, they were citizens.
Okay, so if he were to remove birthright citizenship, is that retroactive? Is that going to stand for, let's say, if your parents were illegal?
No, well, for me, so
Or is it moving forward?
that's a good question. I have no clue. I think there will be
And is it going to be for just illegal immigrants or just immigrants at all? And then how far
Oh,
back?
it would just be for illegal immigrants because.
Okay.
But like,
But then you're saying if you're here on a visa and you're born, then that means the only way that birthright citizenship kicks in is under the illegal.
I think, and this is what's, I'm actually learning this now too, where I used to make the working assumption that if you were from a foreign country and you came here and you married a U.S. citizen, that automatically naturalized you.
Mhm.
I thought that was the case.
Yeah, I
I'm
thought so
finding
too.
I'm finding out that's not necessarily the case.
Mm.
Like your marriage status to somebody doesn't necessarily guarantee that you get to stay in the country legally just because your spouse is here. In fact, I have a coworker, her husband is in Mexico and he's having to struggle to get back into the US, applying to get back into the US. And I asked her, I said, doesn't he just get to
La migra, la migra.
Are you still looking? You're looking for the ICE agent coming around the corner?
I'm hearing sounds, bullets and gunshots.
But yeah, so she's telling me that he's still having to apply to come into the country legally, even though he's married to her, who she's just a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the immigration laws, to be honest. I don't know, but
I'll be honest. I thought
get-
I knew more than I did,
I
and now
thought
I'm
that
starting
too.
to learn. Now I'm
I
starting to
thought
learn
that
things.
if they marry somebody, as long as they weren't deported in the past.
yeah,
or
yeah,
they-
that's not necessarily the case, I guess.
So you were saying, I don't think I let you finish your thought. I'm sorry. That if an immigrant comes here legally and they have a child, and an immigrant comes here illegally and they have a child, the child of the illegal immigrant is getting more privileges than
Yes.
Okay.
I'm open to correction, but the things that I'm understanding right now, that's basically the case. If you take birthright citizenship the way it's been sold to us in the past 4 years, that if someone comes here and just has a baby illegally, that baby is automatically considered a U.S. citizen because they were born here. So, and if you come here legally and like you're just here visiting and you have a kid, I think your kid is still considered a citizen of whatever country you came from.
So what are the privileges that the illegal immigrant is?
Well, the illegal doesn't get that assumption. The illegal comes here and they have a kid, and that kid's just assumed to be a naturalized citizen.
Oh, that's the privilege, being
That's
a
the yeah.
naturalized citizen.
Yeah, that.
You know, I have my thoughts with that, man, because we're in a great country, I believe,
Right,
right?
right.
This is all I know.
Right.
This is all I know growing up, right? But, you know, my family is from Colombia, and I've traveled to Colombia, and Colombia has great stuff too, right? I mean, as a tourist, I see
Right.
that, you know? You go to other countries, I've gone to other countries, cool stuff as a tourist. I don't know what it is to live there, work there, but as a tourist, it's great,
Yeah.
right? So generally, you can say, yeah, I mean, but people have their thoughts, but if the U.S. is great, it's confined to be great because of its political system, its economics, is, you know, that kind of parts. But when it comes to geography and nature, I mean, America is still nice too.
Yeah,
but
you have a lot of variety.
but the earth, yeah, a lot of variety here. But the earth in general is a nice place. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's habitable.
Yeah, but
Inhabitable. So I had this conversation one time. I went to Colombia with a cousin, and we're going out on trips. And they come here, they visit, and they come on visas. They never chose to like stay legally
Yeah.
or even pursue to come legally. They just come to visit, right? And we're in Colombia, and we're having fun. We're like in rivers. We're doing these nature stuff, eating the food, dancing the music, enjoying the culture, going around, visiting the cities, right? And I remember I'm just hanging out with my cousin, and we're chilling, and I tell her, man, this is great. Why do people want to leave this? You know? It's like almost paradise.
yeah.
And she looks at me and she goes, yeah, I don't get it either. Like, I do not want to live anywhere else but Colombia. I love living in
Yeah.
Colombia. I love it here. This is great. And I don't mean to offend anybody because I think I said this to somebody who was she's a Filipina.
Yeah.
I think I said this to her, and she got kind of offended that I told her this because I said like if your country's so great, why do you want to leave it?
Right.
Why do you want to come here? You know, I love America because I was born and raised here, and this is what I know.
Right.
But if I was born and raised somewhere else, I probably would enjoy it. Now I get it, opportunity and stuff like that, but people struggle here too, and people, you know.
Well, I mean, there has to be there has to be something to it because.
And I know she probably got offended because it probably almost sounded like I said, well, if you love it so much, go back.
Yeah, stay in your own country.
Stay in your own country. But in a way, that's how I feel. I want to stay in my country. I want to stay in the U.S. I don't want to go live in Japan or China. Some people might, but I don't.
So,
you know?
so like, I'm sure there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. And I mean, I've actually entertained this. Like, even though like I only speak English, I can see myself, and maybe not so much today, but like 20 years ago, I could envision having a good life in like Shanghai, for example, as an English person there on a visa that's doing technical training for companies and like teaching people English. So I'm
smoking opium.
Oh my gosh. But you know what I mean though, like I could have gone there and probably made a good living for myself where I enjoyed, even though I was in a communist country.
Yeah.
I could like see myself making a nice, comfortable life for myself just by being attracted to people that are in engineering. I mean, at manufacturing in China. Like I'd have a million opportunities to do two things. I'd be able to go there and help, like, show them how manufacturing can be improved, and I'd be the guy that speaks English, and English is the universal business language.
Uh-huh.
So could I go there and have a good life? Theoretically, I could probably go there and have a very good life. I thought about the same thing with Costa Rica. It's like, I know I could theoretically go there and have a good life. But in aggregate, there's something going on. And this is like the thing that people always forget, the question that people always forget to ask. It's like, is there something about the United States that we're hoarding that is so attractive to people outside the United States? Like, are there opportunities here because we're just not allowing the rest of the world to have those opportunities? Or is the rest of the world so poorly run that people will risk life and limb to escape their countries to come to the United States for the opportunity? And I think it is. And so like, if that's the case, it's like we sit here and put a microscope on ourselves in the U.S. about our immigration laws and how we're fairly or unfairly treating people, and it's like we almost forget to ask the question, well, why are they trying to get away from these other places? Like, why are these places so poorly run? Like, what's going on there that everybody's trying to escape? And why don't they fix those? Why don't they fix those things? And I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, the siren song of the U.S. for the last, this is like the neocons. So like, you ever heard the term neocon? So the neoconservatives, the Dick Cheneys of the world, Liz Cheney, his daughter, and really like recently, like the Democrats have become this. It's like, since World War II, the United States has been the world's policeman. And this is something that Trump's griping about, right? So like, there are a lot of foreign countries that rely on the United States for their military protection. Costa Rica is one of them. So like, Costa Rica doesn't have a military. Why don't they have a military? Well, they assume that if something would happen to upend Costa Rica's sovereignty, that the United States would step in and protect them. So there are a lot of countries around the world. Like, we're the only country in the world. We have military bases all over the world. Like, I don't know. Do we have any foreign military bases in the U.S.? Isn't it weird that the United States has a bunch of military bases in Germany and Japan? Like, all these places that we defeated in World War II, we're still there. Like, we have operations that happen in all these places. And the neocons always just assume that we're the world's policemen. So 9/11 happens in New York. So what do we do? Well, we're going to take the fight to you. So we're going to go set up a bunch of bases in the Middle East, and we're just going to go. We're going to go turn the Middle East into a democracy, and the cultures there just rejected it. And it's like, well, what do you do with it? Like, do we just keep fighting until the culture finally transforms into an American culture, or at some point in time do you cut bait and just say, well, you guys can do whatever you want. It's just that, you know, if you touch a foot onto our soil, we're gonna get you. But no, we're over there nation building. So we're over there like spending all of our hard-earned money, and it's crazy, right? So it turns into like these hard to understand strategies. So like, what have we been doing for the last 4 years? We're over there trying to secure Ukraine's border. So like we're trying to secure Ukraine as a country for Ukrainians from the Soviet. We weren't being successful, but like the stated goal was to retain Ukraine as Ukraine.
Okay.
And to keep Russia out. So
but there got to be an ulterior motive to that.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Like that whole thing is a money laundering operation as far as I'm concerned. But the stated objective is that Ukraine has a boundary. Russia has violated that boundary. We have to protect Ukraine, or we have to help Ukraine protect itself. And it's like, okay, so now while you're doing that, you're basically taking our southern border and just saying like, you know, it's like, we don't want to hurt these illegals that are coming across. They're just looking for a better life.
So
like, you know, we'll just let it happen.
And then the criminals get in.
And then the criminals come in, and
then we're not protecting home
and the cartels just love the open area opportunity for trafficking drugs and human trafficking. And it's like, so you're literally telling me that it's more important for us to spend our tax money and our blood, sweat, and tears on a country that's halfway around the world. It might be important in general, but it's like, why is the United States doing all of this? Like, shouldn't countries in Europe be doing more, and we should be doing less?
And then us focusing on home front.
Yeah, and
then that focus is also not only keeping the cartels out, but then Americans love drugs. You know, so there's a demand, right? There's a demand, so then that's also the other side, like.
Yeah, but it's like. So, like, this whole fentanyl thing, which is a really unusual thing. So, like, fentanyl, I don't know if you're aware of this, but, like, fentanyl is actually a very useful medication. So, fentanyl is used a lot in surgeries because that's a great I don't know, like, if they could use it during surgery, but, like, after surgery for post-op recovery, fentanyl is great for that. I mean, it's because it's such a powerful opioid. I mean, it's a synthetic opioid, and it's so powerful that a very small dosage, regulated dosage, does wonders to get somebody through that initial pain and recovery post-op. But fentanyl is so powerful and so concentrated that it takes a minuscule amount to kill you. So the problem is that you got all these people taking drugs, and like, if you ask me, like, you might as well count some of this fentanyl lacing that they do as poisoning. Like, they're literally poisoning people. So, like, they're just killing people because they don't know what they're taking. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, shame on them for being addicted to drugs, but, like, it's like a really serious game of Russian roulette right now if you're out there taking drugs that you think is one thing, but then it's laced with fentanyl.
Yeah.
And, I mean, one of the crazy things that's happened, I don't know if you're aware of this, but, you know, how for the last 4 years we've been being told that the southern border is being as controlled as well as it could, and they're doing everything they can, and it's the government's fault because they didn't sign these bills to control the border. That's why the border is a mess, but we're still doing the best we can. Literally within 2 weeks, they just turned the spigot off. So I believe it's over 90% that the crossings from Mexico into the U.S. have dropped over 90%. So it looks like a cliff. Like, you have this, like, here's how many encounters we have per day, how many tens of thousands. It's like Bebop, and all of a sudden Trump comes in and goes,
people are not trying to get
people are no longer trying to get in. So like they literally, just by basically making the messaging straight, like, you're not going to succeed If you get caught, you're getting sent back. We're not going to let you into the interior of the country.
I saw this clip of
And all of a sudden, like, the people just turned around and went home.
like, yeah. I don't know, man. Like, I have a home. I want to protect my home.
Right.
I don't want people coming into my home doing stuff
I mean, don't get me
that I
wrong.
don't approve, but I don't mind opening up my home to somebody in need as long as they follow my rules. You know? Simple as that. And I'm going to tell you right now, sometimes my AC don't work. Sometimes the heater don't work. It ain't as pleasant to be in my home as you think it is. You might, you know, but you're welcome, you know, like
Yeah.
it's just, I don't, that's why politics, I don't take these stances because it's just, first of all, I know that I don't know enough. I'm ignorant to it all. And I care to a degree, but I prioritize my
Yeah.
things of cares,
I-
you know?
I mean, there's only so much we can do.
And there's this other thing that they're gonna do apparently February 3rd, where all like Latinos are gonna go on strike, not
I don't know.
shop. I don't know if this is true. If this is
I didn't
I don't
hear
know.
this.
This was I heard social media, man. You gotta
But
take it with a
so,
grain of salt. But hey, if that's me, right? I love my Hispanic Latino people. I love my
Yeah.
Colombians, Dominicans, Puerto Rican. I love them. But I gotta get this money. I'm not gonna call out of work. Like I gotta provide for my kids.
So I suspect if that's like being if that's being encouraged, I'll be curious to see how much feed it gets. Like, here's what I've noticed over the last few years, and like my perspective on Latino culture before I ever went to Costa Rica, for example, coming from Pennsylvania.
And Latinos are not the only illegal immigrants. You got illegal
Well,
immigrants
like,
from
but
all
I'm not even
over.
talking about illegals. I'm just
Yeah.
talking about Latinos.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm just talking about people who are Latino. Like,
No, I just don't want the audience to think that I'm only saying Latinos
got you.
because illegal immigrants could come from China. I mean,
Yeah.
they caught this. My brother-in-law, he works Customs and Border Patrol up in the northern border,
Okay.
Canada, right? And
So he's a Latino working the northern border,
yeah, and he's
protecting us from illegals.
correct.
Right.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of Latinos that are in ICE.
for sure.
Yeah.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was gonna say was, it's not only that south border, the Mexican immigrants coming up, or the Central American.
They're coming
There-
from the northern
There's people
border,
coming
too.
in. There was this Russian. So his another officer got killed by a Russian immigrant in Canada. You know, so I'm just saying to say that it's not only they put a lot of like the caricaturizing of the Mexican and the
Well, yeah. So like that's where kind of I was going was like when I was growing up as a kid. You know, I lived in a monoculture. We had like 2 black families in the whole county. I'm not, I'm exaggerating, but like in my school district, there literally was 2 families that were
You were one of them.
minorities. Yeah, no, but I mean they were black.
Yeah.
And I don't even know.
No, I
if
know
they're-
you were one of them, right?
Yeah, right. but yeah, so and it's kind of crazy to think about that. But you're right. Like our family was a foreign family, even though we're white. Like we came from a foreign country, so we stood out as well. And but like where I'm going is, my perspective on. Well, first off, to me at that point in time, Latinos equaled Mexicans. Right? I mean, I'm just being honest,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like that was to me someone who's Spanish
Yeah.
and from our continent is from Mexico.
Yeah, I saw in this movie. Oh man, A Day Without a Mexican, I think it's called. And it's a satire, right?
Okay.
And it's this rich white guy who has apparently all the Hispanics disappear, right? That's the satire. They just vanish. And white America goes crazy. Who's cleaning the toilet? Who's doing this, right?
That's so messed up.
That's the satire, right? But there's a funny line in that movie where they ask him about one of his, I think his landscaper, and he goes, I don't know, he's a Mexican from Guatemala. And you seen that clip where Ozzy Osbourne's daughter is on The View, and she says, this was during Trump's first administration, right? And she goes, and she's like standing for like Latinos, and she goes, she's amongst like the other women on The View, and some of them are like black. I think there was one Hispanic there. And she looks at the camera, she's like, Trump, what are you gonna do when you get rid of all the of the Mexican. Who's gonna be cleaning your toilet? Who's gonna be? And then the other ladies go, oh no, like this is like cringe.
Like just stop.
Stop.
You're
And she
not.
goes,
You're
no,
not.
what I mean, like, and she starts
you're not-
stuttering
like,
on her
you're not-
words.
Like you're not helping.
That's not helping because that's playing
Well,
into the.
Yeah, and so and I guess in some ways too, like my stereotype was reinforced when I lived in California because like the area I lived in, north of San Diego, there, I mean, all the Latinos there were Mexican, like they were
Yeah,
Mexican,
yeah.
and there was like this gang called the Vista Homeboys, like they were prominent in
Yeah.
the city, like they were well known, the Vista Homeboys,
Mhm.
and they're like. I mean, they weren't the Bloods or the Crips, but they were like their own little small-time gang that was hanging out in Vista.
There were these guys.
Right, exactly.
They were the.
That's it. You got it. That's it.
Hey, what's up? That's it, Holmes.
That's it. Yeah, you got it. You know these guys?
You
So,
see it in the movies.
so with that stereotype and my understanding, it was kind of like, all right, well, and I think this is something that Democrats are almost guilty of, and they bank on, is that they want a duplicate, and I think they were effective at this. So like, there are Democrats out there that make a working assumption that black people should all vote for Democrats, and if you don't vote for a Democrat, you're a race traitor, right? So I think Democrats were hoping for a 2.0 version of that, where, hey, if you're an immigrant from Mexico or from Central America
You're
or
a
South
Mexican
America,
from Guatemala.
then you have to support the illegals because they're your blood, right?
Yeah.
Like they're your people.
Yeah.
Where people who come here legally are kind of like, those people aren't my people.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I might loosely share a country origin
Yeah.
or a cultural background, but
Yeah.
I'm not obligated to sit here and support illegals coming across the country just because they're Mexican and I'm Mexican.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like all of a sudden you start to realize like most of the ICE agents, because just based on proximity, because there's a strong Latino population in southern United States. Well, yeah, naturally, most of these immigration officers, or a big portion of these immigration officers, are going to be Latinos.
Yeah, but I think that the reason that some of these people do champion that and say, well, I'm standing, even though I'm not illegal, but if my fellow Mexican or Colombian is illegal, I'm going to stand for them just because we're both Mexican or Colombian
Right.
or whatever, right?
And there are that.
Because
There
of
is that.
the wanting to be a union against oppression.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Where certain classes and groups feel oppressed, you know?
Right.
And usually the oppression, the way it's painted, like how we said earlier,
Yeah.
did
So
we
it's
really
the-
experience
it's
that, or
the-
did we see it in
it's the
Hollywood?
It's the Hollywood version,
right? Is that
probably.
it's American
Or a
white
mix.
racists oppressing all these other people.
Right.
And the argument is, well, you're not even from this country neither, because we're all immigrants in the U.S. Who are the original people of the U.S., right?
Right.
So it's like if you have a stake here, I have an equal stake. And even though I'm legal, my brother who I share loving tortillas with, right? Or whatever Hispanic food, Latino food you eat, is like I stand with them because of our culture thing, because I want to stand
Yeah.
against oppression. Now I don't know if that's really. I think age. You know, the younger
Yeah.
you are, the more you want to be that kind of person. The older you get, and you start building a family.
Yeah.
And building.
and you get a little wiser, I think.
And you
too.
get a little wiser. You start thinking, I don't know if I stand for that anymore.
Right,
You
right.
know.
And I think it I don't think it happened. Like, and don't get me wrong, I would agree that there is a strong contingent of people exactly as you described, where it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to say like, well, I'm Mexican and I see these people trying to cross the border getting quote unquote abused, so I'm going to stand with these people that are getting abused. But it's like, well, what's actually going on there? It's like they're coming across illegally, and it's like, do we have borders or don't we? And how do we protect them? And I think that one of the interesting things is that there are a lot, and I mean, actually, I think this is happening with people who traditionally assume black people should vote Democrat. There are more black people now that vote Republican than we've ever had, percentage-wise, because I think enough of them are realizing like, oh, wait a second, my skin color doesn't obligate me to vote a certain way. Like I'm not race trading because I accept and understand conservative ideas. And I think Latinos were actually they more readily saw that when they started just looking at like, oh, what's the philosophy of one side versus the other? And they started realizing that, oh, wait a second, like these people that are allegedly racist against me, which allegedly, the Hollywood version is that these people are racist against me. It's like, oh, once I take a closer look, it's like, oh, no, wait a second. They have a philosophy and principles that have nothing to do, in principle, that has nothing to do with my race or my country of origin. It has to do with a philosophy that I actually am aligned with when it comes to, just like
you say, you get
human
wiser,
rights.
you know more, and it's like, okay, that's when you look inwards, you realize, do I really stand for that, or do I stand for this?
Right.
And now I'm gonna kind of flip mode on them. Switch. People might hear me back home and be like, "Oh, Georgia's selling out." I don't know. I don't know if they think that because I really don't have a strong stance. But you know what I'm about. You know me. I have people on both sides. And if we say something that you disagree on, love to have you on the show.
Yeah,
just
comment.
to educate us.
At least comment.
Educate us.
Yeah.
Change my mind. I don't know.
I'd love to hear some dissenting voices. People just saying their opinion if they disagree with it one way or another. If they have something that we feel that we misspoke about. I mean, if you have something you feel we misspoke about, just share it with us. Yep. I mean, I'd love to hear it.
I feel like I misspeak all the time. So
me too.
And then life changes. You go through a different phase, and you're like, okay, I think different now. I was gonna say I saw this video of a Dominican guy who deported himself in New York. A young guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He said this country is, and he's telling people back in the Dominican Republic, don't even come.
It's not worth it.
He's like, this is not worth it. And he's saying, like, he came through illegally through the Mexican border, and he crossed I think it's called the Rio Grande.
The Rio Grande. Yeah.
That's why derogatory term.
Oh, the wetback.
Wetback.
Yeah.
For that. And he said he carried a girl on his shoulders to get her across. He struggled. He said he almost got robbed, and he's like, it is not worth it. Like, I'm here, I can't find work, I can't think. And he said he called his mom, and his mom said, why don't you come back? Like, life is good over here. You know, you get your eggs in the morning, you got your potato, you're good. And he's like, and you see him in the news. I don't know if this is real, but he looked like a.
He's like packing up.
He's packing. He goes, I'm deporting myself. I'm out of here. He's like, I'm going back home.
I mean, there probably is something to that where like the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. And I mean, I've been in different countries and I get to see how, I think Costa Rica is a good example. Like I love being in Costa Rica, and Costa Rica is probably one of the better places in Central America as far as like all the countries there. I think Costa Rica is probably one.
My boy George is out there. George, if you're watching this, what up? He's from New York.
Okay.
He's born and raised in New York, and after high school, he just moved to Costa Rica.
He just moved to Costa Rica. Okay.
And he's like, I think he's like a game streamer or whatever. And he was working like in tourism, and he's like, I love living in Costa Rica. I don't want to go back to New York.
So like, and it was beautiful there. Like I could live in Costa Rica, and there's a lot of nice areas there. But when it comes to like the slums in Costa Rica, it's like we have some areas like in Fort Lauderdale or even anywhere around here. Like you can always find like the wrong side of the tracks where it's like a little shady. Right? It's like like you all of a sudden realize like you're not in your home suburban area anymore. And it's like, all right, so that's that happens everywhere. But like there's a huge difference between what we consider our bad areas here compared to like the slums in Costa Rica. Because like the slums in Costa Rica are like these little shanty shacks that like look like they're ready to fall over, like built on top of each other, like along this whole entire hillside. Yeah. And it's like all these like little like metal shacks that are just like it would kill everybody. Yeah. And like it was crazy because the worst area in Costa Rica, and it probably still is, it's called La Carpio. So La Carpio is like right outside of San Jose, and where I lived was it was called I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. It's
You lived in Costa Rica?
yeah. When I lived there for a year whenever I worked down there.
Oh, okay.
So I lived part time down there. But I was down there for like I'd come home every quarter. I'd come home for a couple of weeks, but I was down there 2-3 months at a time.
With Lisa?
Yeah, Lisa would come down too. Yeah.
Oh, she
Yeah.
stayed up here.
No, she would come down too. My company would.
She lived with you in Costa
Yeah,
Rica.
she would live with me in Costa Rica. So they sent us down there. They got us a condo. Like our condo was like right on a golf course.
Nice.
And
This is for the company you're at now?
no, my a past company.
Oh.
And we had a division down there. And I went down there as like a technical expert, and I helped them with their setups and what they were processing.
Must have been fun.
It was great. I mean, and
You didn't pick up Spanish?
No, you know how much Spanish I know. Very little. I mean, I know more Spanish than any other foreign language,
Yeah.
but not that much. But I can't believe I can't remember the town that I was in. But like where I was living was very affluent. I mean, and there were some houses that were like they looked like they belonged in Fort Lauderdale. Like they were huge mansions. So. And they even called it the Gringo neighborhood. So like there was like this really ritzy up and coming area. Then there's this like golf course that wraps in through the whole entire thing. And I was on the edge of a golf and the condo. It was an old condo. Like I mean, my place was nothing special, but it was just like a decent little condo. Like we had a maid and things that she'd come in and clean the house every day.
Okay.
So
okay.
it was
I see
nice.
you, Adam.
It was nice.
I
It was
see
nice.
you.
And I could walk out onto the golf course, but if you walked out on the golf course, there was like a ravine, and right across the ravine was this neighborhood called La Carpio. And there were people dying there every night, shooting each other, and like it was like a really bad neighborhood. And I went into it because I went in there with a missionary. So I found this little Baptist church that I went to now and again. I actually went to it pretty regularly, and I got hooked up with this guy. In fact, I'm friends with him on Facebook still. He was a missionary in La Carpio, and he like had like skateboarding. Like he had like a ministry where he was teaching kids how to ride skateboards, and he would like teach them how to like market themselves, to learn how to put their applications in on computers and stuff. So he was like just trying to get these kids to adult and not adopt the gang life. And I went to this crazy charismatic church that was in La Carpio. In fact, when my boss found out that I went in there, he's like, "Don't ever do that again."
Yeah.
He's like, I would not know how to phone back to the U.S. that you got shot in this town.
Wow.
And what's crazy is that this neighborhood, this area, like I literally could look across the ravine. I could see the whole entire slum from one of the nicest areas in the whole entire country, where it's like mansions, like $10-15 million mansions in this town. And I mean, I lived on a golf course, and
I've
decent
been to a
little
place like
condo.
that in Puerto Rico years ago, and it's called La Perla, and it's right over in Old San Juan. It's a very touristy area, cruisers land. There's a colonial-looking part of San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then getting near the shoreline.
Yeah. The area I lived in was Cariari. That's
Cariari?
it. Cariari, yeah.
And then La Carpia.
And La Carpio, yeah.
La Carpio.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
La Carpio.
you go down some steps, and it's called La Perla, and it's like you go over a cemetery and some steps, and it is like the hood,
Yeah.
I don't think it's like that anymore. I don't know, but last time I went to Puerto Rico, they had signs like with arrows pointing La Perla, and like people were going down taking photos. It kind of almost became like very touristy.
Yeah.
I think because after a song that Daddy Yankee came out with, like Despacito, they filmed it there, and so it came like a very tourist spot. But when I went, I remember the person that took us was like, take off your chains, take off your jewelry, don't take out your phone. I mean, I have an experience. I'll reserve that story for another
Yeah.
episode. But it's like, it's movie type.
It's sketchy.
Super sketchy. But it was all love. Like, it was dope. It was like the experience was good because we knew how to handle it. It was. I'll
Yeah.
save that for another time. But I know what you mean. They're usually juxtaposed like that,
Yeah.
where it's like the affluent neighborhood is like overlooking the hood.
Yeah,
And something
the
you
slum.
said, the slums, yeah. And what you said earlier about Fort Lauderdale having sketchy areas, it reminded me when I first moved down here, I live here in Coconut Creek, and I started familiarizing myself with the surrounding places. And for me, Margate always kind of had this is the hood, right? Like, not everything, 'cause
Sections of it.
sections of it. And I started thinking, like, okay, Margate starts getting a little ugly when you're around here, like, compared to, like, the nicer parts, right? But one time I drove locally down to Fort Lauderdale, and I saw some hoods. Like, I saw some, like,
Yeah, there are
ugly
some.
ghettos.
Yeah, there are some hoods.
Man, when I was driving back up, and I got to Margate, I was just happy to be in Margate, man. It looked like the Wizard of Oz. Like, Margate looked nice compared to those places.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like the distinction where you get some blinders on, and I think this is what would happen in like the 30s and 40s. Like, there were a lot of sympathizers, like communist sympathizers in the U.S., and I don't know if you know about like the McCarthy era, but there was a time when there was a big concern that there were communists that were infiltrating the U.S. government, and quite frankly, I think it still happens to some degree. Like, that culture's still there, but that's not where I'm going. Where I'm going with this is people would go to communist Russia, and they'd be given like a dog and pony show where they'd go and be put up in a nicer hotel in a nice area, and these reporters would be given this like royal treatment, and they'd be like, man, Soviet Russia's doing really well. It's like, this is an awesome country. Like, I mean, I'm treated like royalty, and I'm staying in a nice place, and everything's clean, and like, it looks great. But they wouldn't be subjected to where the areas were with famine and like slums.
And it's kind of like what I said earlier. When you go visit a country,
yeah, you don't get get a
really
real
know.
picture.
I mean,
you don't
unless
get
you
a
have
real
locals
picture.
that show you, and I've been in those experiences where the locals show you the ugly.
Yeah.
But in general, when you're on vacation, you want to have good. You want the nice.
Right.
So you don't know what it's like to actually live there. But
Yeah. So people who are like world travelers, it's still. I mean, I think it still like goes back to the Hollywood vision. Like, if you aren't actually dealing with the real nitty gritty of what's going on, and you go on even like an extended trip, but you don't allow yourself to get exposed to the underbelly of a society, which who wants that anyway?
right.
Like, you still have a distorted view of a country because you got the varnished version, the polished version of that country.
And some of these people, immigrants that want to come here, are getting that
Right.
same image of the U.S.
Right, they get the polished version, the Hollywood version.
They get the Hollywood version.
Right, and I mean, and I try to like temper myself, but I mean, like, the other side of it too is like, and I hear this all the time. People will talk about, like, they'll complain about something new. We have our problems, right? Whatever it is, environmental problems. We use too much plastic, whatever, and like, I've had people tell me about like how Europe does something, or like a country in Europe is like, well, we have this problem here in the U.S., and in this country in Europe, this is how they do it. And it's like, I don't know, like, that might be good, but I don't want to be like Europe, right? It's like, I don't want to be like them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I want to be like the United States.
Yeah.
So like,
America.
yeah, it's like, it's like, is that like a calling card? Like, I must have missed a memo. I didn't know there's a memo out there that we here in the United States want to be like Europe.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, they have their problems too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like they pay crazy prices for energy.
There's mad crime in London too.
Yeah. So it's like, are they a model? They're not a model for me. Don't get me wrong. I want to solve our problems. Like, I'd like to get better. But the moment you start telling me that Europe should be the model for how we do things, I'm going to be very suspicious. Because I'm not so sure that it is what you think it is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see people trying to escape the United States. What was it that Barack Obama said? I think it was I mean, he still won and he still has presidency, but it was a stain on his campaign where during his slogans, he said, it was hope and change, right? His slogan was hope and change, hope and change. And one time during one of his rallies, he said something to the effect of, We live in the greatest country in the world, and we're gonna change it. And it's like, yes, you are.
Yeah. You're gonna change it to worse, right? That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, man.
Well, anything else? Do you want to end it there?
Yeah, let's end it there, man. That was good.
That was good.
That was good. That was fun.
All right. Love you,
Yeah,
brother.
Love you more, brother. On the next one. Bien acicalado con mi pollo guisado. You're like, what is that?
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. I've been having my little